Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. The Minister of Imperial Affairs in Putin's government, officially named Foreign Affairs, though let's not pretend there's a difference, has just dropped a statement so delusional even Stalin might have paused and said, "You okay, Sergei?" "We're not after territory, we're after people," declares Sergei Lavrov, with all the poise of a man narrating a particularly bad historical reenactment. According to Lavrov, the real crime happening in Ukraine isn't, say, the invasion, the war crimes, or the drone strikes on maternity wards. No, it's the alleged violation of human rights, specifically the rights of people whose great-grandfathers once helped build stuff in places like Odesa.
But on territories, I want to make a very important point.
Sure.
We are not about territories. We are about people who live on these lands, whose ancestors lived there for centuries, who founded cities like Odessa, Catherine the Great, who built factories, who built roads, ports, and these people, by twist of history during the Soviet days, became not part of Russia, but part of Ukraine, because this was considered a consolidating factor to neutralize the ultra-radicals living in the western part of Ukraine, when it joined the Soviet Union after the war. The people who live there, they are being deprived of all human rights.
Yes, the classic, my ancestor once installed plumbing here, therefore it's mine defense. The sacred heritage argument. Fact checked? Yeah, the port was built under imperial rule, but Odessa, the settlement, existed long before Catherine the Great ever pointed at the map and said, "Da, I'll have that one." There were Greeks, Tatars, Ottomans, and yes, Cossacks on those shores long before Russian nobles showed up with architects and imperial entitlement. Apparently, if your babushka once served soup to a guy who painted a fence in Mariupol, that grants Russia a divine mandate to roll in tanks and liberate you whether you like it or not. And if we're playing Lavrov's game of historical ownership through infrastructure, then buckle up. London should belong to the Roman Empire since it's got a toga and a Latin inscription. New York, hand it back to the Dutch because 17th century trade posts are now modern territorial claims. And St. Petersburg? Cossacks were exploring that region long before Peter the Great got his Baroque groove on, so by Lavrov's own logic, we're gonna go ahead and label that one Ukrainian now. Congrats. You hear that? Russian propagandists are now playing their greatest hit album called Lies We Tell to Pretend We're Not Terrorists. The news track, a dramatic tale of a heroic Russian strike taking out a military train in Sumy. Spoiler alert, that train, much like a healthy Russian opposition movement, doesn't exist. Here's what actually happened. On April 14th, Russian drones hit a passenger train in Semenivka in the Chernihiv region, not Sumy. The train hadn't even left the station, departure was still 30 minutes away, so thankfully it was empty. But instead of grappling with the reality that they just attacked civilian infrastructure again, the Kremlin spin factory went into overdrive. They took photos from the Chernihiv strike and slapped on the new label, "Military Train Destroyed in Sumy." Boom, instant propaganda. Photoshop meets war crimes. Now let's be clear about what this actually is. It's not just a lie, it's a cover story. A smokescreen to justify what is, by every definition that still matters, a terrorist attack on civilian infrastructure. Not a battlefield, not a weapons depot, and here's where it gets even more grotesque. This fake story? It's not just about deflecting attention from the passenger train they bombed, it's also likely an attempt to justify a real and far more horrific Russian atrocity, a recent bombing in Sumy that killed dozens of civilians. This story is narrative control. If you admit you bomb a city and kill innocent civilians, you're a war criminal. But if you claim you're targeting a secret military convoy, congratulations, totally justified. Bottom line, if Russia wanted peace, they wouldn't need to lie about what they're bombing. They just stopped the bombing. But instead, they've turned the truth into just another casualty of war. Now, this next fairy tale is probably coming from the same shady troll farm that brought us a fake BBC report claiming Ukraine's first lady was detained by the SBU. Remember that one? When Olena Zelenska was supposedly intercepted like a Bond villain at the border and locked up in some top-secret bunker? Yeah, BBC journalists are still recovering from that spit take that one caused. But this new lie, it's nastier, because it doesn't just try to discredit Ukrainian leadership, it targets a child victim. The boy in question was actually injured in 2022 when Russia launched a missile strike on Venezia, killing 27 people, including children. He suffers burns over 45% of his body, and now he's being treated at the Superhumans Rehabilitation Center, a facility dedicated to helping victims of Russian aggression. That's where Prince Harry met him, and a visit of solidarity, a human moment. And naturally, the Kremlin saw that and went, oh no, sympathy for Ukrainian civilians? Can't have that. Time to slander a burn victim. So he cooked up a fake backstory. No missile, no war crime, just a drunk mom and a domestic accident. Nothing says credible rebuttal like gaslighting a burn victim on camera and slapping a fake BBC watermark on it. Now let's be clear about what's going on here. This isn't just information warfare, it's emotional sabotage, a deliberate attempt to erase victims, warp reality, and rewrite history in real time. And the motive? It's the same every time. To downplay Russia's atrocities, smear Ukraine, and convince the world that this isn't a war, it's just a PR stunt by an attention-hungry government with photogenic victims and a flair for drama. It's sick, it's cynical, and is a window into the rotting soul of Russian propaganda. So desperate to avoid accountability, they're now staging smear campaigns against child survivors of their own missile strikes. Donald Trump, never one to skip a headline, has turned his attention back to Ukraine, this time taking aim at President Zelensky. During a press conference after his meeting with the president of El Salvador, Trump basically said Zelensky is always asking for missiles and questions why you'd start a war against a much bigger country without knowing you can win, like it's all just poor planning.
Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame.
Have you spoken to President Zelensky, sir, about his offer to purchase more Patriot missile batteries?
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles, you know. He's against, listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles.
Now, this is classic Trump. Blunt, skeptical of foreign entanglements, and channeling concerns that some Americans have about endless aid and unclear goals. Fair enough, those are legitimate questions. But let's clear up one thing. Ukraine didn't start this war, Russia did. Ukraine didn't pick this fight, it got invaded. And when that happens, you don't hold a strategic session, you defend your country, or you lose it. Trump's right that Ukraine is outmatched. That's exactly why Western support matters. Not because Kyiv is reckless, but because the alternative is letting raw military power dictate borders. And no, Zelensky isn't stockpiling weapons for fun, he's trying to keep his country standing. US aid in this instance is a bet on global stability. Still, Trump's skepticism speaks to a broader fatigue. How long does this go on? What's the endgame? Those are valid, necessary questions, but let's not pretend Ukraine started this or blame it for needing help. If Trump is trying to spark a serious debate about limits and strategy, great, let's have that. But we owe it to the facts and to our allies to keep the record straight. Zelensky didn't start this war, he's trying to end it with his country still on the map. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.